As economies undergo change due to growth, unemployment tends to fluctuate. To start to get a handle on this, let's first talk about the labor force. The labor force is the group of people in a country ready and willing to work. But to properly measure such a thing, we need a more exact definition. We start with the civilian non-institutional population age 16 and older. Yikes, that is a mouthful. Civilian means not an active duty member of the military. Non-institutional means not in prison or in a residential care facility like a nursing home. That is our starting group. Among them, some people are currently working, and some people are not working. The sizes of these boxes are not meant to be proportional, but rather to leave room for some detail. There are many reasons that a person might not be working. They might be absent from their job because they're on vacation or out sick or on paternity leave or something like that. They might be on layoff but expect to be recalled back into their job. We saw quite a bit of that during the COVID-19 pandemic, where people were furloughed, as it's sometimes called, meaning they were temporarily laid off. Then there are those who are not working but are actively looking for a job. Specifically, someone is considered to be actively looking for a job if they have applied to jobs within the last 4 weeks. And then there are those who are not working but who do not fit any of those criteria. These would be people without a job but who are not actively looking for one. It could be that they were looking but gave up, or so-called discouraged workers. But most commonly, there are people who are retired or stay-at-home parents or full-time students or something like that. Those who are currently working or just temporarily absent from their job are considered employed. Those who are temporarily laid off or actively looking for a job but without one are considered unemployed. If a person is employed or unemployed, then they are part of the labor force. If you do not have a job and you're not actively looking for one, then you're not in the labor force. The big thing to note here is that while in the normal parlance of life we might say anyone without a job is unemployed, by the strict definition of unemployment, you have to be actively looking for a job or awaiting to return to one you already have. With this information, we can calculate the unemployment rate, which is by far the most popular statistic reported to describe the health of an economy. The unemployment rate is calculated by taking the number of unemployed persons and dividing by the labor force. Again, these values are determined by our strict definitions for being unemployed and being in the labor force. Here's an example with some real data from 2020. In March of 2020, just over 7 million people were unemployed, meaning they were all actively looking for a job. And those 7 million were joined by many more with a job to give us a labor force of well over 162 million. Remember, the labor force includes both the employed and the unemployed. With these numbers, we can calculate the unemployment rate for March of 2020 by taking 7,185,000 and dividing by 162,721,000. If you turn to your trusty calculator, you'll find this is equal to about 0.0442, which is 4.42% when put into percentage form. Note that for percentage form, we move that decimal place over to the right by 2 spots. Of course, March of 2020 saw enormous disruption to the economy as health officials across the world issued guidance about COVID-19. In April of 2020, the number of unemployed rose to a staggering 23 million people, while the labor force fell to 156 million. That big jump in unemployment was the result of many people being laid off and starting to look for a new job. Meanwhile, the big drop in the size of the labor force came from many people losing work but choosing not to begin to look for a new job. Remember, to be in the labor force, you need to have a job or be actively looking for one. Those who choose to stay home and wait out the pandemic fell out of the labor force. With these numbers, we can calculate the new unemployment rate, which is 23,109,000 divided by 156,478,000, which is 0.1477 or 14.77%. This sudden rise of over 10 percentage points led to a lot of government action, though that is a subject for a later chapter. There are many reasons a person might be unemployed. We typically categorize reasons into one of three types. First is frictional unemployment. This is unemployment that arises because workers have imperfect information about available jobs and need to engage in a time-consuming process of job search. In any given month, a lot of people will just be going through the normal process of finding a job. And that process takes time and effort, both for the job seeker and those trying to fill an open position. For this reason, we expect to see some unemployment every month without cause for concern. This sort of unemployment isn't desirable, and lots of innovations like Indeed.com or resume workshops are aimed at reducing the length of time someone is in this situation. But it isn't a major problem either. A bigger problem is structural unemployment, or the unemployment that arises when certain jobs are replaced by new methods and those job skills are no longer needed. This is the unemployment due to the process of creative destruction. When someone loses their job because the product they were making is now obsolete, or the process to make it changed and eliminated their position, or if the job just moved to a different town or country for economic reasons, then they would be structurally unemployed. If a computer programmer loses their job, they'll probably just apply for another computer programming job. But when someone loses their job due to creative destruction, there are no more help wanted ads for that kind of work. The person has to develop new skills or turn to a different profession. This is the kind of unemployment that people tried to stop for so long, and with it they stopped innovation. But after the Industrial Revolution, societies have mostly turned a blind eye to it, reminding themselves that economic growth, which causes this kind of unemployment, means better jobs that will eventually replace the ones lost. And indeed, they do, eventually. Then there is the new villain on the scene, cyclical unemployment. This type of unemployment is the result of an economic downturn and a deviation from what we call the natural rate of unemployment, consisting of frictional and structural unemployment. This kind of unemployment is the central focus of part 2 of this course, but for now we can understand it as the unemployment that arises because the economy is lousy sometimes. The upside of frictional unemployment is that we end up with better matches between employer and employee. You don't have to take the first job offered to you. You can wait for the job you really want. The upside of structural unemployment is that we have improved on the use of our resources, and this economic growth will bring us better and higher paying jobs. There is no upside for cyclical unemployment, which is why we expend so much effort trying to minimize it.